Hello and welcome. You are watching another episode of Coffee Break with Vanessa, and we gather every Thursday. I release these videos, I share them with the world, and I'm so happy that you're tuning in today. We have a very special guest, someone that I call friend. Very happy to introduce him to you. This is Arnold Smith. Hello, sir.
Hello, how are you?
Good, and welcome.
Good, thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So for those people that are watching for the first time and you don't know what this show is generally about, I like to have conversations with people that are really shifting the world and consciousness and changing the world in their own way. And as the slogan says, you are changing the world simply by loving your own. So these are more transparent, authentic, deeper conversations. We didn't give you a list of questions before. This is very much in the moment and just the way I like it. So it's
Me
perfect.
too.
Yeah,
Yes.
awesome. So a little bit of an introduction for Arnold and why I invited him to be on the show is our serendipitous way of meeting. Very aligned. Do you remember?
Yes, I do. Still remember. Wasn't so long ago, in fact.
No, it wasn't. I had become obsessed with a show called Westworld with Sir Anthony Hopkins. I love that guy. and there was this incredible show. If you haven't watched it, I suggest you watch it. It's got many different layers. And there's a character in that show called Arnold. And he kind of knows the stuff, but nobody knows who Arnold is. And he's a scientist that's been working on artificial intelligence. And then I meet you the next day, and your name is Arnold, and you worked with artificial intelligence for 25 years or so?
Something like that, yes.
And then you started to walk a different path, which
I did.
is very much what I've been asking the guests on this show is, because we are on this path, this sort of conscious, spiritual, more awakened path. And yet it wasn't always like this. So before that, it was...
Before that we were asleep.
We were asleep, yeah. So
Yeah,
why don't you
right.
share a little bit about what your life looked like when you were asleep?
When I was asleep, yes. Well, I of course never thought I was asleep, and in some ways I wasn't. I was half awake, but it's true. I got very interested in computers and artificial intelligence in the early days. It was an exciting new field, and all the people in it were full of enthusiasm, and lots of bright people were drawn into the field. Lots of optimism, lots of media accounts about how wonderful all of this stuff was going to be developing. And this was in the 70s, the late 70s and the early 80s to begin with. And then it went on from there. And it was a very interesting period. I was working on language, developing software that should enable computers to be able to deal with human language easily and readily as humans do, and the way robots and computers do in science fiction films like Westworld, where language is no problem.
No
for
big
them.
deal at all. Everybody gets it.
Everybody gets it, yes. And it's very easy, and it's wonderful to see the films. And as with much of science, perhaps, we were inspired by the stories and by our own imagination and by the science fiction writers to see what we could do with this amazing new technology. And the technology kept growing, and it's been growing ever since. And so it was a fun time, and it was a great way to earn a living and help raise a family and all that kind of stuff. But then, eventually, I began to see that there were some curious things around the edges. And so a big shift started to happen within me. And I now think that was very important, and perhaps a shift that our entire culture is going through in different ways.
What was that shift for you? What did it look like or show up as?
Well, it was multifaceted. I guess I had a very technical, intellectual background, my education and so on, and
you
my
went to
family
Harvard,
background.
right?
I did. I went to Harvard.
And Sussex.
And the University of Sussex, yes.
Those
for
are
graduate
like
school.
not, Those are
They're-
big schools.
they're worthwhile, and actually a lot of interesting people who are now very well known in AI went through University of Sussex in those days as well. So it was a very rich background in its own way, and of course we thought, and this is one thing Harvard taught us, we were the bee's knees, we knew everything, we understood it all.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
best schools in the world.
Well, yeah. And of course, young kids, you can get inflated ideas about how wonderful you are.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then in the background, I was starting to do yoga and became a Buddhist for quite a while, learned meditation. And I think all of these things began to cultivate something else, another side of myself. And then even professionally, I got very interested in intuition and some of the things that were underneath the language that we spoke. I was studying linguistics as well in those days. And so all of these things began to bring another part of me into an awakened state, perhaps, or at least to stir it up, not to put a value label on it.
So you were a Buddhist scientist.
I suppose I was, yes, you could say that. You could say that.
How many of those were at your office?
Well, there weren't many at my office. Actually, a funny thing was, at the National Research Council where I was, for a while I had just a picture on my office door of some crop circles.
Oh
and
my God.
That was quite upsetting to people. There were no comments, no words on the picture. And I didn't talk about crop circles either, but I just had this picture there. And
what caused you to put a crop circle on your...
Well, I wanted to be, a little bit subversive, but just gently so.
That is so awesome. I'm sure a lot of people are talking about that at the, what is it called? The water fountain or something?
The water fountain, probably. And then, yes.
Believe in that possibility of
crop circles being not just hoaxes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, and this is probably important too, it's not that I can explain how they come to be.
Right.
But I think it's a very interesting open question. And I think, surprisingly enough, in the whole technical world and the world of science and academia in general, people keep their curiosity very narrow and are inclined to think that anything they're not directly curious about is pretty well understood already. And so it's I think it's very important to be much more open than that. And that's, I think, another way of saying what began to happen to me. I began to deliberately open myself to other stories and other ways of describing reality and the world. And once you really do that, it starts to change you if you take these things seriously. And I came to feel that it was very important, even to the pursuit of artificial intelligence, that in trying to make artificial human beings, let's say, or human equivalents, we really ought to understand more than we do about what humans are and what the world is like. And that may seem very obvious, but of course, too many people believe that they already understand because they are already humans and they're already living in the world perfectly successfully. But if you're willing to really look and to lift up the carpets and see what's underneath and to go and talk to strange people and study with lamas and talk to teachers of Hinduism and read and study maybe with shamans and so on, you begin to see very, very different stories of the world. And I would finally say that it's only through all of these ways of exploring that we stand any chance of really developing our awareness of who we are. And that's essential even for doing AI, finally.
Yes.
And certainly for language and everything like that. Yes, it's very difficult to say exactly what was happening even to me, because some of these things are very, they emerge, as I'm sure you've noticed
Over
yourself.
time. Yeah.
These things emerge, yeah, and we are pulled and called by forces that are beyond ourselves, or at least beyond
Yes.
what we know and what we understand. But one of the things that pushed me also was even from within the AI tradition and at the AI conferences, I began to realize that we were making much, much slower progress than we had imagined we were going to make.
Yeah, there seems to be this idea that AIs are going to take over the world in the next 20 years. We're just
Yes.
going to have robots teaching our classrooms. We're going to have robots being our doctors. We're going to risk it all. Or even most recently, Elon Musk was, I didn't even read the article, so I probably shouldn't quote it, but I just remember the headline talking about how we should emerge and submerge ourselves with artificial intelligence and make like a superhuman computer of that takes, I guess, the best of what it is to be human and the best of what it is to be a computer and put it together. Not really realizing, I think, that that's exactly what we are already. We seem to have, as human beings, a very computer-like, brain,
Yes.
lots of things at play here. But you've actually brought that up in the last time we interviewed, is that we're very behind in AI, basically mostly because of language. Was that correct?
Well, no, I would say in other areas as well. I think we, for example, in knowledge bases, it was thought at one point that we could construct knowledge bases and companies could take the expertise of all the people in their company who really understood things very well, had lots of experience, and encode all that knowledge into a knowledge base. And then they wouldn't have to hire such expensive experts because they'd have all the knowledge in their knowledge base, and they could just get people to query it whenever they needed some clever advice. And that's not even really much of a thing anymore. People tried quite hard to do that, but it turned out to be much more complicated than they thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have a record of that too. And by itself, that's not too discouraging. People just will say, oh, it's a lot harder than we thought. We may have to do some more basic work. But I think what they may not be real, in fact, more than may, what I now believe is that most of the people working in this area don't realize how much they should be developing their own awareness, their own sensitivity, their own intuition, their own openness to many more ways of understanding the world, if they're really going to make deep progress in these areas. I think one of the things is that, there's an analogy maybe with even during the Industrial Revolution and with the advent of things like the car and the steam engine. At first, when people saw horseless carriages coming along the road with no obvious horses pulling them, they thought, oh my God, what's going on here? These things they might chase me and eat me up or something like that. But nowadays we see cars running down the street and we don't worry too much about it. I suspect, and this is just my own opinion, but I suspect that that's probably what's going to happen with AI stuff, that these things will come into our society much more than they are at present in terms of self-driving cars.
Right.
I mean, so that's an obvious analogy.
Correct.
First of all, cars had no horses.
Self-driving cars is coming very soon, from what I hear, and that's supposed to be the new way to shift and change the way we progress in our society.
Yes, and probably that's going to happen quite soon. I worry slightly that if a horrible accident occurs that's clearly the fault of an AI program early on, it might turn out to be socially
Right.
a big
Big
problem.
deal.
Big
Yeah.
deal, yes. But with luck, that won't happen, and people will come to see that they're useful, and then we'll get used to those, just as we've already got used to people walking down the street talking to themselves apparently, but actually they're on phones and stuff.
Right. See, the thing that I always find fascinating about you, and we have a longer interview that people can find online, and you can see it was like a good hour where we really went deep. And we talked about all kinds of different things in regards to who's interested in AI information and technology, which seems to be a lot of military, and that's concerning, of course, because it's very obvious what their purpose and intention would be with such technology. But what I find fascinating and with you is that you represent a huge demographic of people that have lived a certain lifestyle where they're very comfortable and very confident within a very logical, rational, I say left side brain kind of living.
Yes.
And here you're diving into this other side of the experience of what it is to be human through your travels and I know that you've done some sort of ceremonies and,
Absolutely.
It's opened up something for you, for sure. And so how do you, for people that are watching that are like, they want to, like they're curious, but they won't even act on that curiosity because there's a fear maybe of, I'm going to become a hippie and I'm not going to pay my bills and sell my house, I'm going to lose my shit kind of thing. And then, so they don't even try to allow themselves the room to be what you were saying, is to be curiously engaged in this other realm.
Yeah.
And you seem to be walking a fine balance between the two and doing very well at it.
Well, it's an interesting point, and I think it is important, and that there are real fears that come up. Certainly, they came up for me, and but on the other hand, I think curiosity. I mean, I tend to think that curiosity is the deepest motivator inside me, and always has been. It's what got me into science, and it's what finally drew me out the other side as well.
Right?
So I think if we can follow our hearts, actually, what it finally comes to, we will find resources inside ourselves and maybe apparently outside that will help us find a path. We have to be prepared to challenge all kinds of things we thought we knew and that we've grown up believing all this time. I've sometimes likened it to somebody walking down a path of flagstones, let's say, and picking up one of the flagstones and discovering that there's this huge empty space underneath, and they might have fallen through if they hadn't known that.
Right.
And I think you have to allow your curiosity to let you lift those stones and look underneath. And it's true, it may be opening a Pandora's box, and it may really change a lot of things about you, including your friends and the line of work that inspires you, etc. But as with all of these things, if you're willing to face your own fears and go ahead, it's so rewarding. And actually any depth psychologist will say that too,
Yeah.
We're blocked by our fears, but if we can get beyond them, there's so much richness to be discovered. And certainly I have no regrets at all of having been curious. And I'm sure I'm still held back by various fears that I don't even yet realize, but I want to discover them and pull them back and see what's behind the curtain. And I think it can only be enriching finally. And of course, if too much chaos breaks out, then you can retreat a little bit and gather your forces again.
Yes,
Depend on
you
your
always
friends.
have control
Yeah, that's right.
in certain perspectives. before we end, I want to ask what I've been asking most people, which is at the end of each episode, which is, you know, the slogan is, you can change the world simply by loving your own, right? So what action or what takeaway would you give the audience to really start loving their own world or doing something for themselves?
Yes. Well, let's see. That's a very good question. I think maybe my strongest recommendation is to really learn to believe in yourself and to believe in your own inner resources, even in the face of maybe withering criticism from various people that you might know who will say,
Right.
you're being crazy, you're leaving behind all of the great things that you once knew. You have to listen to those voices and just nod your head and say, okay, I'm hearing what you say, but I'm going to follow my
And do what
my
you were
course.
going to do anyways.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Because, in fact, there will be, even if you lose a few friends in that process, you'll find even more friends on the other side. You know.
Amazing.
Yes, it's really a worthwhile process.
Yeah. I'm your new friend. We
Yes.
found each other.
Absolutely, yes, you're a good example.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for taking the time to be here today and to share your story and it's been like for you.
Well, great. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah.
Yes, it certainly, and of course, it's an ongoing journey. It's
Yeah,
neither
never
of us are
ending.
anywhere.
No,
That's right.
100%.
It doesn't end.
And I know that you're working on a book, so I will definitely put any links that I need to put when this airs, or
Very good.
ways to get a hold of you or anything
Sure.
like that for any of our members or viewers to watch and to get in touch with you.
Excellent.
Thank
Good.
you again for being here. For all of you watching, thank you again. This is Coffee Break with Vanessa. We come with every week. It used to be live, remember? I'm still used to saying that. Live every week. We release these videos. You can join us next week, next Thursday. I have a really special guest I'm super excited to share with you. Be sure to share this, click like, give it to your friends, and remember, you really are changing the world simply by loving your own. Until next week, bye.